The House membership was split over its support of the prayer bill, not divided on the issue of killing it, but divided on the issue of changing it. House sponsor Shelby Dean Ward stood firm to the original content of the bill, which includes a suggested prayer drafted by the governor's staff. About a third of the House members wanted something different. Amendments included the Lord's Prayer and no suggested prayer at all. Ms. Ward successfully rallied enough votes to kill all of the proposed changes, saying the original version would stand the best chance of winning a confrontation with the U.S. Supreme Court over prayer in school. She and the governor were accused of being more interested in the confrontation than adopting a prayer bill. The governor had to give some ground on his proposed textbook selection bill by reducing from 14 to 9 the number of laymen appointed to the committee. But the House Education Committee didn't adopt some Senate changes further restricting the governor's choice of committee members. The retirement reform package didn't come up for debate today, but Finance Director Rex Rayner took the offensive, accusing the Teachers Retirement System Board of Control of selfish interest in the retirement benefits. Rayner also accused the Retirement Board of issuing a gag order on the administrators of the retirement system. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
State Superintendent.
Less than an hour ago, on an 81-8 vote, the Alabama House of Representatives passed Governor Fob James' voluntary prayer bill for state schools. But as Chris Grimshaw of our staff reports from the Capitol, even though few people objected to the idea, there was a significant difference of opinion on how to revive verbal prayers in the classroom.
Debate over the prayer bill centered on changing the bill rather than killing it. The House membership has narrowly killed a series of amendments that would take out the suggested form prayer included in the governor's bill. Several members accused the bill's sponsors, Shelby Dean Ward and the governor, of being more interested in confronting the U.S. Supreme Court rather than trying to provide a bill that would provide voluntary prayer. For more than 3 hours, a slight majority of the House has rejected changes, including one to substitute the governor's prayer with the Lord's Prayer. Earlier in the day, the House Judiciary Committee approved the Senate's version of the prayer bill. Part 2 of the governor's 3-bill program passed the House Education Committee. The textbook bill was approved but slightly modified. The bill would allow the governor to appoint 9 rather than 14 laymen to the committee, but the House committee rejected changes adopted last week in the Senate that would have split the appointing authority with the lieutenant governor and the Speaker of the House. The House version also fails to include the Senate requirement that laymen appointed to the committee have kids who attended or graduated from a public school. The governor's retirement reform came under fire again today as the Alabama Education Association-backed House members tried to continue the staggered meeting days of the two chambers. This would, in effect, have killed the retirement package by using up the needed number of legislative days to pass the governor's reform. House Speaker Joe McCorkadale stepped in and said not only would the retirement reform be jeopardized, but so would his bill that would double homestead property tax exemptions. The Government House membership rejected the AEA move and coordinated the legislature's meeting days tomorrow. Early in the day, Finance Director Rex Rayner came out in an all-out attack against the Teacher Retirement System Board of Control, which last week criticized the governor's retirement reform package. Rayner accused the Teacher Board of Control of being heavy with education-related members who have a vested interest in education retirement benefits. Rayner also accused TRS Board Chairman Paul Hubbard of speaking out of both sides of his mouth, saying Hubbard once supported a retirement benefits bill that would jeopardize the system's financial soundness, according to experts. And Rayner says Hubbard is now accusing the governor of doing the same, even though those financial advisors say the governor's proposal is sound. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
The terms wrongful birth and wrongful pregnancy can be confusing. This case distinguishes between the two. Here's the background. A woman from Colbert County went into the hospital for exploratory surgery, and while in the hospital, her doctor removed her fallopian tubes and later told her she was sterile. However, the woman became pregnant and brought suit against the hospital and the doctor for negligence. She sought compensatory damages for medical expenses and costs incurred in the rearing of a child. The issue on appeal is what damages may be recovered by a parent as the result of negligent treatment or by the negligent misrepresentation of a doctor that the parent is incapable of having children. The woman was given $1,500 for medical expenses, but the doctor was given a summary judgment on the grounds that the woman couldn't recover more than her medical costs. In the case, wrongful pregnancy refers to this woman being told that she was sterile when in fact she wasn't, and later becoming pregnant. The court holds that there is no viable reason for exempting a physician from liability when his negligence causes a patient to become pregnant. Gina Gregory, WSFA TV News at the Supreme Court building.
At first, federal and state officials feared the derailment and chemical spill to be a direct threat to the water supplies of nearby cities in Alabama and Georgia. However, environmental officers have given the go-ahead for normal water system operations. Of the 30 cars that jumped the track near Beach Creek, 9 were classified as dangerous. They contained potassium nitrate, hexamethylene diamine, and adipic acid. Only one chemical was in liquid form.
There has been some leakage of the hexamethylene and some seepage into a stream nearby. However, our own hazardous materials manager believes that a very small amount has escaped into the water and probably not enough to cause any major concern.
According to officials at the scene, the derailment is 11 miles from the nearest point where drinking water is pumped from West Point Lake. Pumping stations for LaGrange, Georgia were shut down for about 8 hours, and those for 4 East Alabama communities, including Lynette, for only about an hour. Environmental technicians continue to monitor the water quality at the pumping sites. Railroad officials still don't know what caused the derailment. They say they'll have to get the fires extinguished and the mess cleaned up before an extensive investigation into the cause of the accident can begin. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News in Troup County, Georgia.
Dixie Concrete Pipe Company is the same company that did business with 5 other officials in Macon and Tallapoosa counties. Those commissioners, some former and current, were indicted on similar kickback charges last year, but all were later acquitted. After today's proceeding, defense attorneys are expected to file motions requesting that each commissioner be tried separately and in Montgomery instead of Opelika. The 36-count indictment alleges the defendants were involved in mailing fraudulent invoices for materials from Dixie Concrete Pipe. The indictment claims those invoices ranged in amounts from $110 to $2,034. Ellis and Crawford are still on the Bullitt County Commission, while Jordan served from 1975 to 1977. All are now free on $1,500 bond. Their attorneys, Solomon Say, Troy Massey, and Donald Watkins, wouldn't comment on their client's case. If the 3 are found guilty, they could be sentenced up to 5 years in prison, fined $1,000, or both. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News at the Federal Courthouse.
And the outcome of that definition has a good deal to do with the revenue stream that they enjoy. In addition to that, to offset, if you will, that lack of support from the long-distance business, which you're obviously acquainted with, the local companies will charge all of the intercity carriers, the AT&T, MCI, Southern Pacific, whoever, IT&T, whoever the carriers are that want to connect into the exchange, will charge them an access charge. That's an entry and exit fee for the privilege of accessing the customers in the local territory. And the manner in which that is settled and the level at which that is settled will also bear then on what is left to get from the regulators to meet the revenue requirements of the plant which is invested here.
But many of you don't know they also has to hear petitions for adoption that face the probate judge each day. It has only been in recent years told me that there is one basic problem with our probate court. You have told me that you want as your probate judge a person who is knowledgeable in the law from 1920 to 1970 to do. I am confident that I am fully qualified to make the type of judicial decisions required of the judge and attorney general assigned to the State Department of Revenue, and I've handled a wide variety of cases.
Yesterday, the House was dealing with the House version of the prayer bill. Today, the House was acting on the Senate's version. When the House overwhelmingly approved the Senate's version, which was virtually identical to the House version, it ended debate on the matter and sent the prayer bill to the governor for signing. As happened yesterday, a handful of House members argued for some changes, including swapping the Lord's Prayer for the governor's suggested prayer. House sponsor Shelby Dean Ward and Representative Roy Johnson fought off the changes for more than an hour. The House version of the governor's textbook committee bill was also passed by the House and sent on to the Senate today. The House version allows the governor to appoint 9 rather than the original 14 laymen to the textbook committee. House sponsor Dwayne Lewis spent nearly 3 hours rallying votes to defeat amendments that would split the appointment of the 9 laymen between the governor, lieutenant governor, and Speaker of the House. Lewis also managed to defeat a number of attempts to require those laymen to have children in or graduated from public schools. And the governor's retirement reform measure is apparently drawing its final breaths today as House sponsors decided not to bring it up for debate because of a lack of support. If that bill isn't passed tomorrow at the latest, which the sponsors say they don't intend to do, then that bill will die because of a lack of needed legislative days to move the reform through the legislature. If the retirement reform measure does in fact die during this special session, the governor has already promised to bring the legislators back into another special session later this summer. Montgomery County legislators were faced with a dilemma today when the county district attorney's office and the county commission couldn't agree on a bill increasing the salary of county district attorney investigators. DA Jimmy Evans and county commissioners squabbled during a House Budget Committee over how the bill should be worded. The Budget Committee, unhappy that it had been placed in the middle of a local squabble, killed the bill. But a Senate version of the same bill was moved out of a House committee with the agreement the squabble be settled before the bill reaches a full House vote. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
Railroad officials still don't know what caused 30 cars of a freight train to derail just south of Hogansville, Georgia last night. 9 of the cars contained the dangerous chemicals potassium nitrate, hexamethylene diamine, and adipic acid. The hexamethylene is a liquid, and some of it has seeped into nearby Beach Creek. Because the creek empties into West Point Lake, a local drinking water source, environmental officials were at first concerned over water quality. Pumping stations for LaGrange, Georgia were shut down for 8 hours, and those for Lynette, Alabama were shut down for about an hour. Technicians are keeping a constant check on water quality at the pumping stations. Meanwhile, railroad crews are continuing the massive cleanup. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News.
That's got you.
Thank you, Governor.
Real pleasure to see you. Good to see you. Thank you, sir. Don't see you back there. Thank you, Governor. Thank you. Good to see you. Thank you so much. Good to see you. All right. Yes, sir. Real short.
The woman was initially awarded a little more than $1,500 for medical costs, but the lower court awarded the doctor with a summary judgment that the woman could collect no more than her medical costs. An appeals court reversed that decision, but now the Supreme Court has reversed the appeals court decision. The court holds that there is no viable reason for exempting a physician from liability when his negligence causes a patient to become pregnant. When the case goes back to court, if liability is established, the damages recoverable by the plaintiffs will include compensation for physical and mental suffering, the loss to the husband of his wife's comfort and companionship during her pregnancy, as well as the medical expenses. One question brought up in this case was the difference between wrongful birth and wrongful pregnancy. The court says this case is one of wrongful pregnancy because it involves a doctor who told his patient that she was sterile when in fact she wasn't, and because of the doctor's negligence, she became pregnant.
It's my pleasure to announce to you, the people of Montgomery County, that I am a candidate for the Republican nomination for the office of Judge of the Probate Court for Montgomery County. This decision was not made overnight. I'm here today asking for your support because I think all of our elected, your will or estate is administered when you die. This is handled directly out of the office of the Judge of the Probate Court. But many of you don't know that he also pledged to you that I will work hard for you and that I will fairly and impartially fulfill the responsibilities of the office of Judge of the Probate Court. With your help and support.
As soon as Governor James puts his signature to it, the public school prayer bill will become law. The House today gave final approval to the prayer bill sponsored by Senator Sonny Callahan. House sponsor Shelby Dean Ward and Representative Roy Johnson defended attempts to change the bill to include the Lord's Prayer, or a severability clause that would keep any court ruling against the governor's prescribed prayer from affecting the balance of the bill. Another bill in the governor's legislative package, which would increase layman membership to the state school textbook selection committee, was passed by the House and sent on to the Senate. House sponsor Dwayne Lewis successfully fought off a number of attempts to dilute the governor's authority in appointing the additional lay members. The amendments that would have diluted that power included splitting the appointing authority between the governor, lieutenant governor, and Speaker of the House, and requiring appointees to the board to have children attending or graduated from public schools. There is some question whether those changes will be kept off the bill once it goes to the Senate. Last week, the Senate agreed to those amendments as it acted on its version of the bill. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
We just want to move it back 1 year, and I want to thank you people for coming.
Court order with a local legislation no better than the local county commissioners can pass a law that'll supersede a state law. So you've been kidding yourself if you believe that. I know you've had some politicians down here telling you that they were going to go to Montgomery and do this.
For the time being, the ERA was not a utopia, did not offer a utopia.
Rich march for women. We believe in equality of citizens, regardless of race, sex, equality of opportunity, and whereas Delta Sigma Theta Incorporated, including communications,
We are determined to build an independent political force with the freedom and flexibility to support or withhold support from candidates based upon their proven commitment to women's rights.
As another member of MIRA has said, quote, "In the end, the men in this nation and in this church may wish they had handed us equality without a struggle."
Dr. Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated and
I'm Henrietta McGuire from the American Civil Liberties Union.
the era of women's struggle.
A yeoman's job. See one of our school board members, Mr. Ron Creel, we're glad to have him at the press conference. But I anticipate vetoing it, yes.
You anticipate veto?
Based on what I know now, I want to read the bill and see if there's any real meaning for it, and I doubt that there is. Absolutely. Backed off, and as I mentioned to you several weeks ago when we were discussing that, for me to say $20 to $30 million more for funding a retirement system and Social Security than the total amount of property taxes collected to run our cities, to run our counties, to run our schools.
I'm officially announcing my candidacy for re-election as a member of the State Board of Education representing district. Along with the drug and alcohol has begun to unravel the... I am one leader in education who advocates no new consumer taxes. I believe the answer lies with positive, productive leadership. This leadership must begin with the State Board of Education and must reach out into every schoolhouse in this state. In the last 3.5 years, we have begun to accomplish in a small way the necessary things we are going to have to accomplish in a big way if we are to meet the challenges in the 1980s. The brain power of this country put the Japanese where we are today. We in America have become guided by the State Board of Education. As a member of the State Board of Education, I have initiated efforts to see the
ERA supporters said less about why the amendment failed and talked more about their strategy for the future. Now, supporters say they'll begin screening the voting records of their congressional and legislative representatives to see who favored or fought the bill.
Now fully intends to work towards removing from office as many of those opponents of equality as possible and to support those who have supported women's rights.
As another member of MIRA has said, quote, "In the end, the men in this nation and in this church may wish they had handed us equality without a struggle."
Supporters say one reason the amendment failed to be ratified by 3 states is because of a fear of people who did not know what ERA is all about. But supporters say their struggle is far from being over and say it won't be over until they get assurance of liberty and justice for all people in America.
Christian people, men and women in the state who believe
The governor claims pure raw politics led to the non-action that killed his retirement reform measure. The governor offered another set of statistics to show what he called the sordid story of overpriced retirement benefits. He said that state, county, city, and school districts collect $308 million a year in property taxes, while retirement and Social Security benefits for teachers and state employees alone cost $342 million. The governor's choice of using property tax figures for comparison may not have been simply coincidental, because the House today passed House Speaker Joe McCorkadale's property tax homestead exemption bill. The Speaker's bill would double the homestead exemption at the state level and offer the 3 other local subdivisions the same option. If all subdivisions of government adopt the higher exemption, a $40,000 house would be property tax free, and the state could lose $5.5 million and counties as much as $22 million. But the bill won't go into effect if yet another bill delaying the federal court-ordered reappraisal of property is passed. The Senate today put a delaying bill into position for final passage tomorrow. The governor says he expects to veto such a measure, partly because it would fly in the face of the court order. The Senate also passed 2 other property tax measures sponsored by Senator Earl Goodwin, doubling the homestead tax exemption and ordering local governing bodies realizing more than a 15% increase in property tax revenues to adjust local tax rates down. Those bills will be before a House committee as early as tomorrow. With his retirement issue dead, the governor checked in on his public school textbook selection committee bill. So far, the House has stayed with the governor's version. Today, the House Education Committee replaced the stricter Senate version with the governor's version. But downstairs, the Senate Education Committee swapped its stricter version for the House bill passed yesterday. It's likely the textbook bill will go to a conference committee tomorrow after action by both houses. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
The medical profession may be one of the most demanding careers an individual could choose. Long hours under extreme pressure may cause some physicians to turn to alcohol or drugs to escape the day-to-day routine. In the past, physicians were offered little help once they found themselves on the road to alcoholism or drug abuse. But now the Medical Association of the State of Alabama is offering help to physicians through the Impaired Physicians Program. The Medical Association of the State of Alabama has a special telephone hotline to obtain information on the program or to refer a physician to the program. Referrals can be made by calling the hotline number in Montgomery, area code 205-263-3947. Once a referral is received and the problem is found to be legitimate, 2 trained physician intervenors confront the physician about the problem and ask a commitment from him to enter a treatment and rehabilitation program. President-elect of the Medical Association of Alabama, Dr. Hamilton Hutchinson, says the Impaired Physician Program is not designed to be a policing program, but is designed to help physicians with a drug or alcohol problem re-enter a full professional life. Matt Carmack, WSFA TV News.
We heard from
The retirement reform measure was essentially killed today when the measure wasn't brought up before the House. This was the last day the bill could have been considered before the needed number of days ran short. The governor said it was pure raw politics that kept legislators from supporting his measure. The governor says he hopes to have better luck when he revises the issue for a 4th time during an expected August special session. The governor's textbook selection bill is facing a questionable future. The House is supporting the governor's version, allowing him to make all of the new lay member appointments, and the Senate is holding firm to its version of the bill, which splits that appointing authority with the lieutenant governor and Speaker of the House. That issue is expected to go before the House and Senate again tomorrow. The issue today was property taxes. The House passed House Speaker Joe McCorkadale's bill doubling homestead exemptions at the state level and extending that option to city, county, and school districts. The Senate, meanwhile, passed a bill that would delay a federal court-ordered reappraisal of property values. The governor says he expects to veto that measure because it does go against the court order. And the governor has been doing some homework on the reappraisal issue and says he'll take a stand on the matter in the weeks to come. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
But it's an inclination without having read the bill.
The net income limit, which is established for the elderly and the handicapped, has increased from $705 to $775. The elderly and the handicapped, if they have certain expenses such as medically related expenses, this can be deducted in getting down to their net income. For all others other than the elderly and handicapped, it's gross income. For those over 60 and handicapped, it's net income, and that's increased from $705 to $775.
Raise my stuff, come and look at it, but give me a fair deal. So you can set up.
In my opinion, the extension of 1 year, and that's strictly my opinion, people. I hope it's not true, but in my opinion, that will be proved to be unconstitutional because you cannot supersede a federal court order with a local legislation no better than the local county commissioners can pass a law that'll supersede a state law. So you've been kidding yourself if you believe that. I know you've had some politicians down here telling you that they were going to go to Montgomery and do this and do that. But let's put it down where you can understand it.
We just want to move it back 1 year, and I want to thank you people for coming.
We don't have to listen. We'll tell you a lie quicker than
He ordered that 2 of them be given jobs and that the other 2 be given appropriate back pay since they were hired shortly after suit was filed. And in addition, he gave the attorneys for the plaintiffs 14 days to file a motion for attorney fees which the county commission will have to pay.
held back because
it's an election year, and Alabama ERA supporters say they'll be paying special attention to the candidates running for the state legislature and at the voting records of their representatives to see who did and did not support their cause.
Today, FEW is joining in a vigorous new effort for achieving equality for women on a state-by-state basis through grassroots citizen activism. This is the beginning of a new day, beyond ERA.
There is no turning back.
Supporters say they don't know if there will be any changes in the bill when it's reintroduced. One supporter said, quote, "It says all we wanted to say right now." Kim Davis, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
Men and
There has to be a threat of irreparable damage to a plaintiff for a judge to grant a temporary injunction. Judge Varner says he can't see how that requirement fits Mark Ellard, since Ellard is in jail now and will continue to stay behind bars. Ellard's attorneys Ira Burnham and Ralph Knowles say they'll provide Varner with more information to try and answer some of the questions he has. They say the judge could rule on the temporary injunction tomorrow. Knowles says there's no reason for the reconsideration hearing since Ellard hasn't violated his parole. He says the only reason Ellard is back in Alabama is political pressure from the Attorney General.
Mr. Ellard has been sentenced. He served nearly 10 years in prison. It seems to me that's a fairly serious punishment. He's serving a life sentence in the state of Georgia right now. I don't know what more people want out of him.
Ellard was paroled from Alabama last spring. He was serving a life sentence plus 20 years for the brutal murder of one woman and the beating of another. Graddick was behind the move to bring Ellard back to Alabama for the reconsideration hearing. But Graddick says politics has nothing to do with Mark Ellard.
The first thing they say when they can't say anything else is that something's political. This is not political. This is just part of the job that the people are paying me to do, and that's to keep violent, dangerous people behind bars.
That hearing is set for next Wednesday at Kilby Prison. Gina Gregory, WSFA TV News. Ellard's attorneys say they think the case is clear. They say the state, namely the Attorney General, is using political pressure to keep Ellard in the state after he's been legally paroled. They say Ellard is being treated unfairly. But Graddick says Ellard should never have been paroled in the first place, and that the parole should be declared null and void.
I'm not surprised that they're taking this position. However, I feel confident that the law is very clear about what a parole board's responsibility is when they consider someone for parole, and In this particular instance, they did not completely and adequately look at the Ellard's record and criminal history when they made their decisions.
All the parole boards say it was legal. We've reviewed the statutes and the regulations and the files, and there's nothing to indicate that it was not legal, and I challenge anybody to find anything that was legal. And I think the important thing for people to understand this proceeding is that Mr. Ellard, for whatever he may have done in the past, is entitled to be treated according to the laws of this state and this country.
Ellard's attorneys say Judge Varner could rule on the temporary injunction tomorrow. Gina Gregory, WSFA TV News.
We're going to ask those who are going to participate in the dedication of the memorial to take their places. Hey, how we're going to do this now, the rest of y'all.
The Air Traffic Controllers Union members are packing up and going home. The local president says they're as angry today as when they walked off the job nearly a year ago. If Ronald Reagan made his point by taking a tough stand, then C.J. Farr says PATCO made the public and Congress aware of air safety problems.
They have bills introduced to improve the working conditions of the controllers that are left in there now. So we've proven our point also.
The union line hasn't changed with bankruptcy. Farr still says it would be smarter to let the fire controllers back into the towers.
Because the system needs the controllers are out here, and it's just a waste of money, taxpayers' money, of manpower just to let them sit out here and let the aviation system go into depression like it's doing.
Farr says PATCO will be back, and the union will start rebuilding sooner than the government realizes. Susan Silvernail, WSFA TV News.
It is logical to ask what more can be gained by...
We have had new roads, we've improved the streets, we've had new bridges, we've had new recreational facilities, as an example, in Montgomery, without bleeding the taxpayer to death. And I feel that if we have good, strong, fiscally responsible leadership in the legislature, that our state government can become more efficient. record on the City Council. And as I stated in my speech this morning, I am for strong law enforcement. I am for fiscal responsibility.
It's less traffic, and I can easily pick up I-85. I usually pick it up either at Wall. I take the position that if we are going to maintain that a person is innocent until he's proven guilty, then there is a distinct difference between an indictment and a commission of an act. If you're saying if you're going to equate the commission of an act with an indictment, then you're throwing the presumption of innocence out of the window. But I think constitutionally and morally, it would.
And as I stated in my speech this morning, I am for strong law enforcement. I am for fiscal responsibility. And I am for government staying within its means. An example of that has been my record on the City Council, and that's what I'm running on. We have had new roads, we've improved the streets, we've had new bridges, we've had new recreational facilities, as an example, in Montgomery, without bleeding the taxpayer to death.
It's less traffic, and I can easily pick up I-85. My action was prompted by my interpretation of the case, the Montgomery case, which grew out of the Whitehouse case, where the city paid the legal fees. They were challenged by citizens, and then, of course, it went to the Supreme Court. And I believe Chief Justice Talbot wrote the decision saying it was permissible because an indictment was no indication of guilt. You could be innocent as anyone can be, and yet could be financially ruined for performing a public duty.